Next on Arizona 360, a closer look at the sharp rise in asylum claims.
Smugglers are kind of selling a dream.
Understanding how the system processes detainees.
Right now, we are not separating families.
And challenges they face in court.
There is a very high rate of denials of asylum claims, but that doesn't mean that they lack merit.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. We're here in Nogales, where in the last few days, troops began arriving to support the needs of Customs and Border Protection officers and agents here along the international line. As troops installed razor wire along the border wall in Nogales, about 50 yards away, a man jumped over the wall, tumbled, then scaled back over into Mexico to evade law enforcement. Border Patrol asked the military to place wire between ports of entries to prevent this very thing from happening.
If you look back at what happened down on the Mexican and Guatemalan border, there were people who were scaling the fences. So we're deploying that wire right now is to keep people off of those fences for their safety and also for the safety of our officers.
In San Luis, these images show dozens of men, women, and children illegally entering the U.S., then surrendering to Border Patrol agents. Just this week in the Yuma sector, agents processed 650 people in less than 48 hours. To combat the surge, Customs and Border Protection asked the U.S. military to step in. In Arizona, Operation Secure Line deploys more than 1,000 active-duty military troops. CBP says they'll help safeguard the border.
Given recent events in Mexico, there is a concern that large groups will attempt to rush the port of entry and potentially put our officers at risk, damaging infrastructure and disrupting legitimate trade and travel.
And when we're asked to come to a mission, we come out and we figure out solutions to tough problems. So the problem never changes. That could be Iraq, Afghanistan, or Arizona.
Customs and Border Protection says in one 24-hour period, at least 6 family units tried running through vehicle lanes of traffic here in Nogales.
Our mission is not to stop the caravan of migrants. Rather, we are here to support CBP personnel so they can continue to serve in a law enforcement capacity and encourage and enable the lawful and peaceful immigration.
Customs and Border Protection says asylum seekers will not be turned away, but must present themselves lawfully at ports of entry. The agency says it is working with the Mexican government and non-governmental shelters. The Tucson sector of the U.S. Border Patrol has seen about a 40% increase in apprehensions compared to last year. Agents in this region are arresting about 200 people a day. The bulk of that activity is happening in the West Desert near Lukeville. Arizona 360 toured the area with Agent Daniel Hernandez.
So right now we're driving towards the west. We're just to the west of the Lukeville port of entry in the Ajo Border Patrol Station's area of responsibility, and we're driving west. This is an area that's been commonly used in the last few months for smugglers to drop off Central American family units and unaccompanied children. So we have seen an influx, and it started in the later part of June. The first group we apprehended was about 57 people. Since then, we've seen the groups get progressively larger. These very large groups we're coming across with the same type of strategy used by the smugglers. They were dropped off in a very remote area.
If we weren't here right now, or if there wasn't another agent, how would Border Patrol know that a group had just
So we do have detection technology. So what you can't see here are the different surveillance methods that we have. So we have different types of surveillance equipment, whether on a mountain or on a mobile unit. And then obviously we have different kinds of detection technology scattered throughout the desert so we can detect something.
This vehicle barrier is designed to keep vehicles out. You can see how easy it is for a person to cross the international line. On the south side is a Mexican highway near a bus stop. On this ride-along, we find a bus ticket.
You know, there's a lot of things that should be here in the natural environment. You can pick out as an agent or as somebody that works this area, you can see what some of the differences might be. This is clearly a bus ticket. A person was dropped off here in Sonoita, which is right down the road.
Once somebody crosses this international boundary, do they stop and wait or do they run?
They'll stay and wait most of the time. We have seen some cases where the folks might wander off and wander further north, but doesn't matter, doesn't change the dynamic. It's still very dangerous and it still poses a threat to them.
You've been doing this for a while. Is that new, where people cross the border and just stand and wait?
Well, in this particular area, that's something that we've seen relatively recently. This is not something that We've seen larger groups in the past. We've seen larger groups of hundreds of people many years ago, but this large amount of people crossing in this area and waiting for Border Patrol is more of a recent thing in the last few years.
We left the area and traveled to the Ajo Border Patrol station to see where immigrants are processed shortly after they're detained in the desert. A rare opportunity to see inside, cameras are not permitted. However, Border Patrol did provide this video. It shows agents processing detainees, then taking biometrics. Our tour ends and Agent Hernandez takes us outside to what's known as the Sally Port, to where belongings are stored. We saw a few individuals, to include a mom and children, and then young men. It seems everyone's cared for. They have things that food, drink, and then shelter if they need some rest.
That's correct. So when a person is brought here, we make sure that their needs are met, right? Nourishment, any kind of water or fluid, medical care if they need it, and then everybody receives a small kit with some snacks, toiletries, toothbrush, and additional things to work on hygiene needs that the person might have. Within the facility, if anything else is needed, then we can address it in here in a controlled environment, away from the hot or cold or dangerous desert.
Daniel, I noticed that you have interview rooms. You mentioned that the transparency is really important. The consulate can drop in at any point during the day?
That's correct. So the consulates of the Central American countries and Mexico can come into their temporary holding areas whenever they feel necessary without any kind of preemptive warning to the Border Patrol. They can come in, and we welcome that. We want them to be in communication with the citizens of their country to help facilitate the immigration process, whatever it might be.
The increase in arrests translates into a new normal for the Border Patrol. Chief Patrol Agent Rodolfo Karsich tells us how the agency is handling the influx.
Large groups of family units and children who have been showing up in the West Desert area out there being dropped off overwhelm our resources that we have in a lot of these areas.
When you say overwhelm, how are you responding to that?
Well, I mean, first of all, it impacts our operations, our personnel, our ability to process, and then, of course, if there are medical issues. So, I mean, when we see typically maybe a smaller group show up, we can interdict, we can process. We have time to do it, but when we have large groups that present themselves, that presents a very unique challenge for us is to do all of that.
Some of these individuals have ID, others do not. How do you go about determining who someone really says they are?
Well, that's a problem that we have. I mean, we have biometric equipment at our stations, but that's only if we have encountered them in the past. Other than that, we're having to rely on different government agencies, consular offices, is to actually try to verify the true identity. We get so many people that come into our facilities claiming to be part of a family unit, only to discover is that may be a friend, a relative, and it's not actually a family member with them. So we we take great pains in trying to first of all identify who we have. Working with these host governments is to try to do that proper identification. But that's why that can be so problematic for us as well.
One of the things we learned on our ride-along is that there is some consistency with the stories that your agents are hearing from the same groups of people. Are you noticing any trends in what these people are coming here with, saying that this is why they're here?
Well, I think it boils down to some people are being coached. They've heard in the past that if you say a couple of phrases, that's automatically going to get you through the asylum process. Understand that anyone who makes a credible fear or makes an asylum claim, you're going to have an opportunity to present yourself to an asylum officer where he'll determine whether or not there is a credible fear, and at that point in time you would be referred to a court who will make that final determination.
Is someone profiting from all this?
We have heard information is that criminal organizations are receiving payment for every individual that comes across the border. Long gone are the days where a migrant simply chooses that they want to cross in a particular area, but it talks to you just how organized they are. So if they can come in and drop a large group that we have to contend with, then you also have the possibility of other illegal activity occurring, such as drug smuggling and other things that are happening in those areas.
Are families separated while they're in Border Patrol custody?
We can separate family members if let's say one of the parents had some type of a criminal record which would require incarceration. If we can't tie or make a familial association, meaning we can't make sure that that child is a relative to that person, or if the child's in danger. So there are issues, but right now we are not separating families at our detention facilities, but we can if we do determine that there are other issues.
What's that logistical balance like inside that processing facility when you have a mother with her children, as we saw, and then a group of 15 men?
Well, I mean, first of all, we take great care in everyone who we take into custody, but we segregate the families, the children, and the male population, because what you also have to understand is there's also criminals that we arrest on the border. I think nationally the number that has been mentioned was about 20,000 criminal arrests that we make. So it's a combination of people that we take into custody, and then we have to make sure is that they're provided safe detention while they're in our custody before we turn them over to ICE.
The Department of Homeland Security manages the country's immigration system. Once Border Patrol processes people, they usually transition into the custody of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Overseeing enforcement and removal proceedings in Arizona is Henry Lucero. We spoke to him at ICE headquarters in Phoenix.
ICE will assume custody of those individuals and either place them in our detention locations or make them eligible for a bond or place an ankle monitor on them for release.
The influx that we're currently experiencing, are those individuals classified under the same that you typically see throughout other times during the year?
This is nothing new. This is what we've seen over the last 21 years that I've been doing this job. The difference that is happening now is there's more volume of family units. That is mom, dad with minor children.
With respect to when children are involved, I understand there's a settlement that is in place for 20 days. So at that point, the children or the family units must be removed from federal custody. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the Flores settlement is in regards to children. It limits how long they can stay in an ICE family residential center, which is approximately 20 days. It does not limit them when they're unaccompanied and in the custody of Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is where unaccompanied children are housed going through the immigration proceedings before they're kind of delivered to a sponsor or a family member. But when they're accompanied by their parent, they can be detained by ICE at a family residential center, and that's where those limits of 20 days come into apply to the Flores settlement. You know, this is a loophole that many family units have figured out, that smugglers are kind of selling a dream. Particularly in Arizona, most of the families that are being apprehended by Customs and Border Protection are coming from Guatemala. About 85% of them come from that country.
So perhaps the messaging is that if you have a child with you, you'll be able to stay together. Is that correct?
The message is if you're arriving with a child, it's very unlikely that you will be detained by ICE. It's very likely that you'll be released. ICE, and what we do, we have a higher probability of repatriating someone if they're in custody and they're going through the process while they're in custody. Now, when they're released, they still have to go through the process. They're just doing it in a non-detained setting, which could take several years till they come to the completion of their case.
You mentioned placing an ankle monitor on some of these individuals. Is that everybody, mom, dad, child, who will then be released with that?
That's only on an adult, so it's the mother or father. If they have no medical conditions, we have some criteria. They are placed with an ankle monitor. They are served specific paperwork asking them to report to an ICE office within 1 to 2 weeks. They have to check in whatever destination they're traveling to, and then they have to promise to appear in court and to check in at multiple avenues to ICE offices to make sure they're complying with our restrictions. They're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to break U.S. law. If they do those things, they're subject to detention and violating their terms of release. If they cut the ankle monitor off, they're also subject to prosecution by the federal government for destruction of government property and hindering removal efforts.
To your knowledge, have you had instances where people have removed their ankle monitors?
Yes, we have. Particularly, it's rising in the class of family units altogether. Not necessarily do they cut them within our jurisdiction here in Arizona. I would say 95% of the people that are apprehended, the families that are apprehended, are traveling outside the state of Arizona. Very few are staying here. So where we see ankle bracelets being cut off are generally at their destination that they're going to live in, like North Carolina, Florida, Texas, wherever they're traveling to. When they get there is oftentimes where they cut it, which falls in a different jurisdiction for prosecution.
I've had a variety of customs officers, ICE officers, Border Patrol agents tell me that the moment someone comes on U.S. soil and requests asylum, they're sort of legitimized in the process because as a government we do process them and they are given a time and a place to report to. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say there's due process involved if you make that claim, that it is a system. It's a system that if you're not in custody is very long. If you're in custody, it could be a very fast process comparative to single adults that don't have family. We have people that make that claim every day, and generally they're only in custody less than 30 days. A full adjudication of their case down to an immigration judge. Of course, they have the right to appeal that, so some people stay longer. But we do know that if people are detained, the process happens at a much faster pace than not being in custody. I think that people need to know that our current system needs a legislative fix, that the reason this problem is continuing to increase is because it's well known now about the Flores settlement, the 20 days, that ICE doesn't have the capacity to detain family units, and we've only seen the numbers increase at dramatic fashions. And so until there's some type of fix to the Flores settlement, a capacity issue for ICE, I think the problem will likely continue.
ICE helps coordinate efforts to place immigrants in shelters and other non-governmental agencies. In Tucson, Casa Alitas is working to support the needs of immigrants awaiting their court date. Nancy Montoya takes us inside a shelter that has helped more than 4,700 men, women, and children in the last 2 years.
Hola, ¿le gusta?
The doors to Casa Alitas opened to immigrant families in 2015. And since day one, Pam Vondrak, a retired pediatric nurse, has been a regular volunteer.
Mostly we are seeing children and moms and even grandmas. These are the most innocent, loving people, and all they want is a chance. They just want a chance in America. They love this country.
9-year-old Jennifer Martinez was quick to tell the volunteer that she loves America because she is an American.
My daughter was born here, and so she doesn't want to be in Guatemala. She wants to be here, in her country.
In 2009, Alvina Martinez and her husband were in the U.S. illegally when Jennifer was born. In 2013, Jennifer was 4 when they were deported back to Guatemala.
There in Guatemala, it is very sad. We don't have anything. We don't have enough to eat, and we don't have land. We don't have a house. We have nothing.
So Alvina and her husband vowed that somehow their American-born daughter would be raised in the U.S. The husband left first. He made it to Cincinnati, Ohio, where Alvina has 5 sisters. Some are in this country legally, others are not. The family pooled their money and sent Alvina enough for her and Jennifer to buy bus tickets from a remote village to the Mexican border. Twice, they only made it to Mexico before being deported back to Guatemala. On their 3rd attempt, they were arrested and spent 3 nights in a Mexican jail. Jennifer didn't understand.
Why are we here in jail? She asked. Who did I kill? She said. I have my papers. Yes, she does, but I don't. All I have is ID from Guatemala.
Mexican officials eventually released the mother and daughter. They continued north to the U.S., and 20 days later, they made it to Nogales and requested asylum. Immigration officials found they had a credible fear of returning to their home country and set their hearing date for a few weeks in Cincinnati. In 2014, the next step would have meant getting a ride to the Tucson bus station, where immigrants would have to fend for themselves, but local churches stepped in. Casa Alitas started with a case of Gatorade and a few snacks from volunteers at the bus station. But months later, when immigrants kept coming, Catholic Community Services of Southern Arizona knew structure and organization were needed. The efforts moved into an all-volunteer operated home owned and managed by CCS. Pam Vondrak has been here since the very beginning. She joins hundreds of other volunteers who rotate to make the operation run smoothly. Every day, she says, there are new families.
They're coming here with hope. They want to work. They want to help. They want to contribute. And if anybody studies the culture and studies the economics, these are the people that give to America. They're not sitting home playing video games. They are working.
But none of this would be possible without the cooperation of ICE officers who, upon establishing a credible fear status and scheduling an asylum hearing, then work seamlessly with Casa Alitas and drop off immigrant families. At first, says Teresa Cavendish from Casa Alitas, there was a strained relationship between immigration officers and volunteers.
It went from, faceless, nameless agents who we worked with at the beginning, who kind of did these invisible drop-offs in front of our facility, to folks that we know by name, that contact us by phone, by email, by text, who smile and wave when they bring folks here.
Cavendish says the story of Casa Alita is one of compassionate individuals, from the volunteers who bring their time and talents to those who donate money, food, and clothes, and to the ICE officers who connect the families to the nonprofits. Volunteer Pam Vondrak says she left her rose-colored glasses at home. She says she knows there may be some dangerous gang members trying to hide among the desperate. But she says those are not the people who come to Casa Alitas.
And they'll tell you that when they're here. We just want to work. We want a chance. We want to be able to contribute to America. And that's the whole story. There's nothing dangerous or frightening about them. They're full of hope.
And hope, says Alvina, is what she and her daughter are holding on to.
You've heard the heads of Border Patrol and ICE speak about the legal challenges surrounding undocumented crossings. Here now are two people familiar with the federal immigration system. They joined us in the Arizona 360 studio. Perla Treviso is a border and immigration reporter for the Arizona Daily Star, and Shafali Mulcharik Desai is a professor in the James E. Rogers College of Law. For being here, let's begin with the latest news. President Trump saying that it's possible that people could not get asylum even after requesting it. Shafali, I want to start with you. Is that actually within the legal capacity of the president?
Well, so that's the law. The law says that whether you arrive at a port of entry or not, it's irrelevant. You should be able to claim asylum. Now, what the administration is pointing to is a different portion of that statute, which states that when the president finds that entry of people might be detrimental to the interests of the United States, then the president can do what's necessary to curtail that entry, to suspend it, or to put restrictions on it. But here's the thing, there's the other statute that clearly states people can apply for asylum whether they come to a port of entry or not. So in order for the president to do what he's done legally, and there's already a lawsuit pending on this, he would have to be able to say that he can rewrite this law of Congress unilaterally.
Any indication that people are treated differently whether they come to the port of entry, request asylum, or if they're arrested between ports of entry?
Not to this moment. So you have some people who start at the port of entry, but maybe the wait time is too long. They keep telling to keep coming back, and then they go in between the ports. Ultimately, here, especially here in Arizona, most of those families are released with a notice to appear with an immigration officer at a later point.
Can people work during that time frame? Can children go to school and live their lives, so to speak, prior to meeting with a judge?
I mean, children can go to school as long as they have a residence in the U.S., right? Schools are not supposed to ask about immigration status. In terms of work permit, I do think that once you start in the court process, if it takes longer than 6 months, is that correct? Or
it's 150 days.
You can request a work permit, which is something the administration has also continued to bring up, saying that it's that families are taking advantage of this because then they can get a work permit while they go through the slow system, which now has more than 1 million cases pending.
How do we fix this backlog? Are there more judges being hired?
I don't think they're being hired as much as they need to be. And one of the important factors, and I've talked about this already, is legal representation, legal orientation programs in the courts. So it's increasing judges, it's increasing lawyers, because and here's something that has been studied before. When you provide people with access to justice, when you give them the sense that their claims are being heard and that they're receiving a fair due process and that procedures and laws are being followed, they are far more likely to accept the outcome when it comes, whether or not that outcome is positive or negative for them. And that's something we haven't focused on in our system.
So is there a disconnect, though? Is the fear of persecution and safety, security an issue in Central America, or is this a result of misinformation and messaging in those countries?
I think both. I think there's the administration, both this one and the previous one, has tried to go to Central American countries and advertise and say, if you come, you're not going to be allowed to stay, talking about the dangers of crossing. But you also have the misinformation from the smugglers and the guides who tell them, you know, you can come and you can present yourself at a port of entry. You do have the people who are just fleeing for their lives, and it doesn't matter what the government or the smugglers are saying, they see no choice but to come to the United States to seek refuge.
Shefali, is that a fair assessment? I mean, I think it's fair to say that life in Central American countries has always been challenged, but suddenly there's this influx. Is something happening there right now, or is this a result of the messaging?
I think that the situation is growing worse, and I think that there probably are higher incidents of persecution. And I wanted to mention that one of the reasons that the administration is putting forth for this new proclamation is that many asylum claims they're saying they lack merit. And what I want to say is, yes, there is a very high rate of denials of asylum claims, but that doesn't mean that they lack merit. What it means is that people often don't know what it requires to put forth an asylum claim. Again, they don't have legal representation. And we know that asylum seekers in particular are 5 times more likely to prevail on their claims if they're represented.
Okay. All right. My thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all for now. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be taking a break for the Thanksgiving holiday, but we'll return the following week, and we'll see you then.